to college football. So we appreciate everybody being here. If you checked out our live stream last night, we debated the top programs in college football in the 60s and 70s. Check out the video with Rick Anaya, our USC postgame host. And on a Wednesday night, we served up the Big 12 and the Pac-12 in the realignment debate as to whether the Pac-12 is going to be able to solidify itself, stabilize, and continue on as a Pac conference, or if the Big 12 is going to step in and be able to swipe up some schools, as is rumored and bantied about out there. And of course, at the core of all that, the media rights platform and how that negotiation situation is going right now. We got Jason Watkins on the line from Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Jason, appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Check out Jason's work over on Hall of Fame College Football Podcast right here on YouTube. And we got Cody Stovall, locked on OK State. Cody, what's going on tonight?
Man, I greatly appreciate the invitation to come on here, sir. All is good. All is good in my world.
So here's my deal is I just saw the tweet actually on Twitter, whether that was yesterday or today, to see that you guys had some reaction to our discussion here at the Voice of College Football a couple nights ago. And I'll remind everyone, leave your comments and questions there in the live chat, and we will give them a look. Certainly the super chat stands out, so please give us some consideration there. Hit the like button before you do anything else. It's easy. Whether you're going to agree with Cody or with Jason or me or none of us, hit the like button if you enjoy the college football content. Absolutely. And then you can rest easy and lock it in here at the Voice of College Football for the next several minutes as we discuss the Big 12 situation. But so this all started with our conversation here at the Voice of College Football, and I tried to line it up in regards to a Pac-12 contingent, a Big 12 contingent, and presenting the conversation of, we all know the deal. This is the talk around college football. This wages on all over the place, I'm sure, with both of you and on a myriad of channels each and every day, each and every night here for all of us who love college football. And that's, is the Big 12 going to stay together? Are they going to be able to make it through this? Are they going to be able to piece together a media rights deal that is going to keep this conference intact, or at least intact in the way that we know it now? Or Brett Yormark, he's made his intentions, his pursuits rather public, that he would love to continue to expand his territory, his conference. He sees what the SEC and the Big Ten is doing. If he's reasonable about it, he probably doesn't necessarily think that he can get to that point, but he can certainly make up ground and improve his situation. So, Jason, let's start with you, because you checked out the conversation we had on Wednesday night. Just your thoughts about what we discussed and some of the highlights and the lowlights from your perspective.
Well, first off, I enjoyed the debate, and I thought that everybody kind of availed themselves pretty well. I think the main thing that, in something that we kind of talked about, pre-show, is that the issues that I would have had with any of it would have been the fact that it seems to me like a lot of the things that don't have a lot to do with what's going to happen in the future continue to be spoken about by some of the folks out there. And mostly being AAU membership, or, the amount of money being raised by the schools for R1 research, things like that. None of that has to do with where you play college football, or college basketball for that matter. These guys that are, I would take and talk about, like, say, Kansas being an AAU school. They do a lot of research with Big Ten schools because they're in the Midwest and they're AAU. And so they do a lot of that research stuff like that. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not they play in the Big 12 as compared to the Big 10. That being said, I know that, that there's a lot of questions about whether or not there's a culture fit or whatever. My deal with that would be that I feel like it's one of those things where, again, none of the students at the University of Utah are going to find themselves in, Oklahoma State, land. So I just kind of feel like some of this talk is disingenuous. In the end, it all boils down to the fact that whether or not, and just so that everybody understands this, and it's something I told you as well, is that my show is centered mostly around Oklahoma, who is leaving to the SEC. So I don't necessarily have a dog in this fight at all. I have my feelings about the way the Big 12 has been run for a very long time. And I'm not sitting here saying that I want the Pac-12 to die, because that's not what I want. I think that there's a price to pay for all of this money grabbing that a lot of these schools have done, as far as in the way the conferences are being set up now. You're losing a lot of rivalries, which is what I think is the lifeblood of college football. And you're also losing, regionality of the sport. And I think that it's that moving into a direction of professional football, which I think a lot of college football fans would tell you that they're not exactly happy about that. And that being said, I do feel like, this constant back and forth between Big 12 fans and Pac-12 fans isn't healthy either. I think that it's one of those things that I don't think that it's the Big 12 that started all this stuff. In fact, that if anything, the Big 12 got, when Oklahoma and Texas decided to lose decided to leave to the SEC, the Big 12 was in trouble too. Because Clay Avkoff, there was an opportunity there to grab up as many, as I've heard, as 6 schools from the Big 12. Somehow he was unable to convince any of those presidents to do so. And so, now they kind of find themselves in the same position, because about 9 months later, then USC and UCLA decide that they're going to make the jump to the Big 10, and yet it's always seemed to be vitriol headed towards Yormark in the Big 12, but none of it heads towards the Big 10. Oddly enough, it's you know
right.
what I mean. It's oddly enough, you don't really seem to hear any of that kind of stuff. So, that being said, I don't know. I think that there's a lot to be said for what's going to happen. I think that it's not going to boil down to whether or not the AAU research is going to continue with any of these schools. I think that that's going to continue as long as you're an AAU member and you're in that area. I know a lot of people think that is something that has an effect on it. I think it's very little, if any. So
before Cody jumps in on this, I just want to clarify something that I'm not remembering the timeline on. So, of course, Texas and Oklahoma bolt July or August of 21.
Correct.
And then how long was it before UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU joined the Big 12?
So that was a little while later. It was definitely after the opportunity was definitely there for the Pac-12 to grab up those schools from the Big 12. So I want to say, I don't know, Cody may know this one better, but as far as I want to say, it was maybe 3 or 4 months. It wasn't very long. I know that they were reacting quickly.
Something like that, 3 or 4 months. Just because, I recall, just like everybody else, in regards to me pumping out content, trying to get a perspective on this. What should they do? What can they do? My recommendation was exactly what happened. Within days after Oklahoma and Texas bolted, I said, shoot, UCF, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati are the 4 best group of 5 programs out there. Go grab them. Now, they obviously didn't listen to me, but it turned out to be the case of what that was. But you're right. For 3 or 4 months, the Big 12 was on shaky ground. And there's always that tipping point when a conference is in that place, like the Big East was in football close to 15 years ago, whatever that time frame was, where, you're down to, at that point, 8, if I'm doing the math correctly. Yeah, they're down to 8. And if somebody gets a good offer, if Kansas, let's say, like a lot of people thought, would bolt for the Big 10 or whomever, you get down to 6, and then everybody else scatters. There's that tipping point between they said the right things and said that there was solidarity and that they were binding together. And I believe that, but they also have to look out for their own institution and their own athletic program and say, we got to run if we get a better deal. So for the Big 12 to go out there and get the what I thought were the 4 best options available, that was a home run move. So Cody, just in regards to our conversation on Wednesday night, again, I know that you guys took it in. I was just curious to get your thoughts.
Well, I think the overarching theme for me that was frustrating is it's not just one source, right? There's a significant number of individuals in the media game that cover the Pac-12 and they all seem to be spreading the same exact message. And that message is basically, if the house is burning down, don't worry about it. We still got time for the fire department to show up. And to me, I just feel like you're selling your fan base short when you're telling them everything's fine. Don't listen to the Big 12. None of it's true. Nothing's happening over here. There's nothing to see here. We're all great. We've got everybody exactly where we want them. And to me, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
So I'm going to get to the crux of the conversation that I think that Jason hit on. And I don't have an answer to it, but I want to get back to it because I think this is almost everything. There are a lot of facets to it. There's a zillion different directions we could go, but I want to start back on this in regards to how much do we put together or how much do we separate academics, culture, all of that versus the football and the athletics. How much of that overrides each other, or how much of it does not touch one another or impact or affect each other? Because all three of us know, and everybody watching, that corporations and organizations are run different ways. We can run an organization that has, let's say, 3 divisions, and one of them could go grab a better deal in a certain facet of what they do. And we could say, yeah, go get that best deal. It's better than the deal what we've got currently. And we'll continue to run as we do now. Mm-hmm. Or it could be like, no. You need to be in line with everything else that we're doing. And this is the way we run our business. And even though you're going to save $3 million by doing X, Y, and Z with that company, we don't deal with that company because we're partnered with them. So, and that's really the crux of what I can't answer, because I can certainly see the debate as Jason set it up, and I have talked about it. And we've seen this happen throughout expansion and realignment over the last 15 years in college football. You get a better deal significantly. We know that the Pac-12 schools aren't running for $37,000, if that's the difference, or anything, even beyond that. But if whatever their demarcation, their line of demarcation, hey, 10%, 12%, 15%, and it's probably different for every school, every athletic program to an extent that, hey, they're going to say, hey, they didn't meet our number. We were willing to take a 15% cut or 15% less than what we can get in the Big 12, but they didn't hit it, so we're gone. Or I can also buy the argument that's made that these schools are in line with each other in regards to belonging to a conference. And I know that partnership looks different in every conference. And let's take the Big Ten, for example. We're talking about libraries in regards to sharing of libraries and resources, all the way down to rental car distribution and saving on millions of dollars for all those universities because they got the same rental car deal. So there is, and then there's just the history of, again, those partnerships that go way back and in regards to, and so are we going to run to another conference in football and in all our athletic programs for another $8 million per year and put into jeopardy and really cut off the ties that we have academically, socially, and otherwise with our existing conference?
Okay.
And again, I don't have the answer to that question. I'm just lining up for everyone. Those are the 2 schools of thought, basically.
Right. But I don't see where anybody has shown that that's going to actually be the case. In fact, the lining up is the AAU membership. It's not the Pac-12 membership or the Big 12 membership. It's the membership in the AAU, which, because as I said, when you start talking about Kansas, they already do a lot of stuff with the AAU in the Big Ten, and they're not in the Big Ten. They're not competing in the Big Ten or anything like that, and they're already doing that. As when it comes to like Nebraska already being in the Big Ten, they've lost their AAU status, but they're still staying in there. Now, obviously, if they had lost their AAU status, probably headed in, maybe they don't get into the Big 12 or to the Big 10. And I understand that may be a prerequisite to get into the Big 10. What I'm saying is that I don't see where that falls, you know, as far as that is concerned. Whenever, if you're going to talk about Utah, for instance, yeah, they're doing great in the Pac-12. They've shown themselves to be more than capable of competing on the field. But in the end, you know, there's not a big difference between what they're doing there and what you were seeing happening at Baylor, or, you know, some of these other schools, even, you know, even there at TCU, or, you know, obviously Kansas, as we were talking about. Texas is an AAU program. That's something that I kind of misspoke about last night, but they are an AAU program. Obviously, they're leaving to the SEC, but Baylor's one of the top medical programs in the country. They're not an AAU school, but I don't know that is going to stop. I don't see how that stops you from continuing to go ahead and do research within the AAU, and you being a part of the AAU, your research that you've already done with Stanford. It doesn't stop any of that. If because your football team is playing on Saturdays, maybe in Texas, I don't see the big deal there. As far as like fundraising and everything else is concerned, and that's something I heard Tony Altimore talk all about, all these other things the other night like that. And you start hearing them. You can't tell me that they're going to stop because they're going to Stillwater. Yeah, they may not have any kind of fundraiser there in Stillwater for alums, but is that going to stop them from going to Chicago, going to New York, going to Washington, D.C., and having these fundraisers between the alumni? No, it isn't. And so I don't see where, again, I feel like it's disingenuous to bring a lot of that into it. And you see a lot of this stuff pop into there. There's no real indication from anyone that is going to stop if you stop playing sports in that conference. You know, and if the Pac-12 doesn't even have a deal, that would be the thing that, you know, they don't have a deal that's going to, the other part that's more important probably than the money side of it, because I don't see the money side being a huge difference. And maybe it is, you know, you've heard different people have thrown out different figures out there as to what the deal is going to be when the Pac-12 finally gets it. But the other part is there going to be any kind of, are you going to be visible as part of this deal? Is it going to be that 80-20 deal, like what you're hearing from the Apple? Whatever the Apple offer was, you know, it's some in that 80-20%. 20% equates to about one game a week. So you start looking at one game a week is going to be on there. Now, who is going to be that one game every week? Are they always going to be throwing that to Oregon and Washington? You know, I mean, and now you're stuck on, you know, no linear help if you're, say, Colorado. You know, they've got Coach Prime there now. I mean, you think that they're going to be okay with being stuck just on streaming? I don't think that that's what they brought him there for, you know. And the same with Utah. Utah is the defending back-to-back Pac-12 champions. Are they going to be on television enough to continue to be able to recruit at the level that they're now recruiting at, to be able to compete at the highest level, which is obviously an expanded college football playoff coming up? And I think that a lot of that has a lot more to do with it than however much money your research, you know, all your research money is we're talking about. So again, I just feel like that there is no real indication that that's the case. You hear a lot of the media folks talking about that, or, you know, media, or just what I call the Pac-12 mouthpieces. But people that I see as respectable journalists that are in the sport, have been in the sport for a long time, they're not saying the same things. And I know some people within the Pac-12 as well that are saying the same, that one thing doesn't have anything to do with the other. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Well, I can't refute any of that, and it all makes sense. The one thing I will say about some of those decisions not necessarily technically affecting relationships, whether that's AAU or otherwise, you know, there are such things as what you can and can't do versus what you are more inclined to do. Meaning, I'll use this analogy. If a particular person changes high schools, they can still have the same friends. That doesn't change their friends, but most likely it's going to change their friends. It's going to change their peer group by switching high schools. And so there are a lot of cultural and social things that go on between these universities that line up with their conference affiliation.
My answer would be much more simplistic. I think, honestly, it's almost preposterous in today's age of college football to pretend that academia is going to continue to hold the same level of I don't know, relevancy that it does at the very moment. Now, I'm not saying it's going to completely go away, but as we continue to matriculate more and more and more and more towards these guys being professional young men, what degrees are offered by a certain university is now becoming less and less necessary for the student athletes. Sure. So again, when you're trying to make the distinction between whether we're going to join a conference or not, if you're using academia and the age-old adage of how academia was viewed, to me, I think you're selling yourself short. And, I some of the things that were discussed on your show, right, was how the academia money comes from research and fundraising and things of that nature. But no matter how you look at it, right, there was an article a couple years back from Axios Sports. I think the writer was Kendall Baker. But he put out something, right, and it was a diagram of statistics that broke down by the billions, each university's individual assessment of where their funds come from. And by and large, it's always going to be institutional or government assistance, whether you're a private school or a land grant type of university. And then number two is typically your media rights deals. And then you start talking about the donors and the ticket sales and student fees and things of that nature. So again, the pretend that the research money is going to have a hand in the athletic side of things in an athletics-driven world, to me, just seems slightly nonsensical.
So we do need to understand that, and again, this is the crux of the entire argument, is how much of that determination is made on athletics, i.e. football, solely versus the academic portion of this. And I am challenging you guys with questions and with the other side, but I'm not in any way stating that what I have to say is the truth. So I'm just playing devil's advocate because I don't know.
Right.
Because I can certainly see, especially this being a world, even though we consider it an athletic world, and we all have a football perspective here. So athletics perspective, but of course, football rules the athletic budgets. But these decisions are made by the university presidents. Of course, and they do have academics in mind. First and foremost, you would think.
Do you think? But I don't think that one thing has to do with. I don't think that you have to choose one over the other. Is where I'm at on that, Mark. And I'm not saying that it's that academics don't matter. I mean, you're hearing seeing a bunch of this stuff in the comments here, but that's not what I'm saying. The academics do matter. Academics are always going to matter at Cal and Stanford. They're always going to matter. And for that matter, they're always going to matter at Oklahoma State.
Sure.
These academics this is not something that they're looking to just, it's not all about football. It's not all about basketball. It's not all about any of it. But one thing doesn't have to do with the other necessarily. I don't buy that you're going to stop doing research with Utah because Utah is now in the Big 12. I just don't buy it. And in fact, Kansas is already doing, as I said, they do research in the Big 10. With Big 10 partners in the AAU. That is the membership that matters when it comes to that kind of stuff. As far as I agree that you do a lot of fundraising at athletic events and things like that. I understand that. But in that case, I would feel like the chances are that you might do a little better with raising some of those funds if you have a school that actually travels well, which I think we've seen that the Pac-12 isn't as great at that as what you're going to see the Big 12 be, with some of these schools traveling to these Pac-12 destinations. I think that there's going to be times that you might see more Baylor fans in the stands than you would see, say, Stanford. and obviously Stanford's a little different animal too. But the one thing that I would tell you is do you think that they are going to care about if they get the Big Ten invitation. Stanford and Cal get the Big Ten invitation, or Oregon and Washington get the Big Ten invitation. Are they going to care about their AAU partnerships there in the Pac-12? No, they're not. They're gonna move, and they're gonna continue to. They'll do their research with whoever they want to. Now, obviously, they'll have an opportunity to do some more stuff with the Big Ten at that point. But you're going to tell me that all of a sudden you're going to forego regional AAU partners, doing research with regional AAU partners just because you've moved your football program that isn't doing academic research. They're doing football research. They're out there working, trying to win games. You're going to stop doing that academic research with your regional partners because your football team is in the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the SEC, or the ACC, whoever it may be. It's silly talk.
Well, the first thing in that I would determine would be that while proximity still matters because of technology,
sure,
where your partners are isn't as crucial as it was years ago. So you can partner with anybody around the world.
I got you.
But the proximity still matters. You still want face-to-face if that's, and there are still other advantages to being close. But the Big Ten also just doesn't provide football money, football brand. It obviously provides a higher academic ranking across the board than the Big 12 does as a group. So it would be a better fit for Stanford in particular.
But conference realignment, nothing about conference realignment has to do with the academia side. It's my only point, right? It's not like execs from Fox and ESPN are calling the Pac-12 to ask if they can bring them to ESPN to put on the great debate, right? I feel like it's just not fair to people of the fans in the Pac-12 to continue to pretend that, everything's fine.
Yeah, well, I in that way, I see both sides of the argument because I do think that academics matter depending on, again, conference. They of course, as Jason is pointing out, the academics obviously matter to the school presidents and to the schools. Jason's just making the point that they make the decision about the athletics separate from the academics and will continue on with academics and partnering with whomever they can. Right. We got a super chat coming in from Mike. Mike, appreciate you being here. Tony has said Pac-12 schools would lose research grants and funding if they went to the Big 12. There's no evidence conference affiliation is tied to research. The Big 10 has that set up. The Pac-ALC does not.
I've heard that as well.
Thank you for that, Mike. So let's get to the money that's being speculated about concerning a Pac-12 deal, who they would partner with, what that would look like. The most recent articles that I've seen, and we could all cite 5 or 6 reporters that most college football fans lean on for all of this. And I'm not here to either confirm that they do good work or discredit them, one or the other. I have not followed their careers closely enough to say he's a hack because he missed on these 13 things, or he's amazing, he hits it every time. I don't know. But I take in the information just like everybody else.
Right.
Pretty recently,
Tony Altimore was on here doing that though the other night, and that was one of the things that did come up in our show. So, and
I'm not gonna lie. I was excited to have a conversation with Mr. Altimore, but maybe at a later date.
Sure, we can possibly do that. That's not my decision.
Again, it seems like there's this contingent that seems to be obsessed with throwing shade at the Big 12, and just like Jason mentioned earlier, being an OU guy, right? Them going to the SEC, he doesn't necessarily have a dog in the fight of the success of the Big 12, whether it flounders or it's massively successful, right?
None at all.
But at the end of the day, this is all kind of going in a direction that nobody can stop. This is immovable. This is an immovable sword. It's just going.
Oh, you're right there. Yeah.
You know what I mean? This conference realignment, it's not going to die down. It's not going to go away. It's not going to stop. And we can have dialogue about what's best for each individual group. But part of the conversation the other day was, should the Big 12 schools leave the Pac-12? And I still never even, found a justification for why a Big 12 school would even consider leaving right now, even if it were for the SEC. Obviously, it's the SEC. You got to consider, like, I'm not unintelligent, but Big 12's in a very, 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 very good spot. The Pac-12 is not. So why do people gloss over that they're the same when they're clearly just not in the same position currently?
And that's the point that I think a lot of us are that we were making a lot of the other night, was the fact that maybe that, hey, listen, if they're able to put together some kind of a television deal that works, how long is it going to work for? Number one, is there a linear partner? I don't know whether there is or not. And from all intents and purposes, you're starting to hear stuff about USA Network, possibly NBC. You're starting to hear some different things. And I think that's great if you're able to do that, because I think that obviously when you start looking at, I think that Pac-12 schools would love to stay together if they could. Now, is there not going to be a situation where, though, in, whether it's, a couple of days down the line or a couple of years down the line, where the Big Ten does decide to expand again? And I feel like, if you look at Oregon and Washington, they have a foot out the door. They have a foot out the door as it is. I think that obviously Stanford and Cal probably pretty close to doing the same thing. If that was, and that move would definitely happen if you're trying to get Notre Dame into the Big Ten conference, you definitely need to bring in somebody like, one of their rivals that they play all the time is going to be Stanford, and they want to continue with that. And so if you're going to lure Notre Dame into the picture, which I think is definitely something that they want to do, you're going to want to do that. So what is the long-term viability, I think, is where you're going with that, Cody, no matter what is the long-term viability, right?
What's the one thing
5 years down the line, are you going to be able to do that? Are you going to be able to stick together? And at that point, if you're losing revenue, and even, and some would say definitely, the ability to be seen often, and somebody said in there that nobody cares about Colorado and Coach Prime. Maybe they don't in the Pac-12, but I can guarantee you that nationally people want to see Colorado and Coach Prime. They do. And, whether or not they were 1-11 a year ago or not, and whatever that's going on within that program, this is where I think that there's a big disconnect. So many people are thinking that this matters and that matters. Ratings matter.
Of course, ratings matter. But if a conference is making a decision on who to bring in as a football program based on who the head coach is, then I wouldn't trust their decision making very good, especially when it involves Deion Sanders.
Well, listen, I mean, I'm not telling you that Deion's going to stay there forever. What I'm telling you is that if you're a conference that's struggling right now to get a television deal, and even knowing that those ratings are going to matter as long as he's there, that you're not trying to make sure that you're getting him on television. And there's no linear partner as we know right now, that there is not one. Yeah. If you're listening to what you're hearing from Dennis Dodd and some of these other reputable sources out there, if ESPN isn't out of it, they're this close to being out of it. And that's the one place that for sure people are gonna find you, is on ESPN. Are Absolutely. They going to go behind the paywall and pay for Apple TV to watch the rest of it? Maybe Pac-12 schools, maybe Pac-12 fans will, but are you going to lose your visibility to the rest of the country? And that's what I'm talking about. If you're not doing that, then your program can't grow. And if you're Utah and you're this close to being a national contender, do you want to wait that out and see what's going to happen, or go with somebody who already has it's in fact, it'd be completely opposite of what you're hearing this Apple deal is, at least 80% linear, maybe up to 20% that would be streamed on ESPN Plus, which everybody uses, everybody knows. And it's, it is what it is. I think a lot of people there, if you look at the membership in ESPN Plus, it's a lot higher than the membership already is with Apple, obviously. So you already would have, that option of, you're going to get looked at by the folks that are already there. part of that ESPN Plus. You still have to build your viewer base with Apple.
Yeah, we can certainly debate how much streaming is important or how much linear is important versus the streaming. The thing we can't debate is that streaming is growing and linear is declining, but it's still the dominant force. And to your point, I can only speak to my viewing habits. And if something is on streaming, I watched every NFL game on Thursday night for years and years and years. As soon as they went on Amazon, and I've got Amazon, I just didn't think about it. It was gone. It was out of my head. Right. Didn't even go on there to think about it. Shoot, NBC's a broadcasting giant and has been for years, but I don't connect NBC and college football. So I'm usually sitting.
Notre Dame.
It's usually like 3:30 in the afternoon. And I'm watching games on ABC and CBS and everywhere else. And I see the Notre Dame score. They could be playing USC, playing a big game. And I'm like, oh, yeah, Notre Dame's on NBC. I guess I'll flip over there if it's a good game. Out of my mind. So I'm only one guy and I'm an older guy. So I may not be the perfect example. But I think football, college football, I'm thinking Fox, ABC, ESPN, CBS, those and that's what I'm doing. Yeah, I don't believe, unless you're a diehard Oregon State fan who wants to see the lacrosse team and whoever else,
right,
that you're going to be paying that kind of money, and just not just the money, just the time, the aggravation, the attention, just to do something. It's difficult to get people to do anything. Shoot, I can't get people to hit a like button on here, and they tell me they like watching these videos, and I can't get them to hit a like button.
Right. Hit the like button, folks.
Can't get them to hit a like button that takes like 1.3 seconds to do, and it doesn't cost any money. So go hunting around on streaming, although we do know, shoot, if the NFL's on streaming, so the next point in this is tied to what you guys are talking about right here with streaming versus linear and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, the look of this negotiation is not good for the Pac-12. It doesn't look good. And I only base this on my experience with negotiations, either for myself or watching negotiations, that we obviously have two parties, we've got the Pac-12 and then we got a bunch of parties, but they're all on the same side. And one of them needs the other and the other one doesn't need the other. Apple TV is going to go on without the Pac-12. Sure, this would be a great addition to our menu, but we got 100 other things. Not a big deal if we don't pick it up. We'll continue to go on with what we do. Same thing with Amazon. We're not in the college football business. We'd like to get in the college football business, but if we don't, we do our own thing. We're making $1 trillion a year. Doesn't matter. Well, the Pac-12 needs them. They need somebody. So the longer this goes on, the more, to me, it has an appearance of desperation and vulnerability and being in a position where, hey, we need to cut a deal. We need something. Mm-hmm. That's just a perception on my part. It's not necessarily reality.
I'm not sure that it's not reality, though. That's, because I think that every day that that you don't have a deal is another day that if you're Brett Yormark, you can try to go convince one of these four corner schools, because if that happens, from what I was, and I saw what Jim Williams was talking about last week, at the moment, the Big Ten isn't looking to expand, according to his sources, and Jim's we're talking about a 7-time Emmy winner, a broadcaster, director, producer of college football, college basketball, for multiple networks too. His sources are telling him that right now within the Big Ten, they're not necessarily looking to expand. That sounds decent for the Pac-12. What happens is, okay, but then the next sentence was, now, if two of those four corner schools or one of them, and it starts looking like it's going to come apart, then we would reconsider that and possibly add 2 or 4, depending on how it goes. I think it's all about the next domino dropping, right? And the longer that this TV deal isn't ironed out. And if you listen to what you've heard from Washington and Oregon all along, is that they wouldn't consider anything that was a majority streaming, even a majority at all, much less. And that means, 51-50. they wouldn't consider that. Well, obviously they haven't hit on anything that is something that they'll, Tony brought up on the show the other night that, Washington is running this show when it comes to, the presidents, that's the chairman is their president of whatever it is, the CLM or whatever it is. Okay. So apparently they're still not presenting any of these offers to the entire board there because of the fact that they're on, majority streaming is what we're talking about now. If ESPN is indeed out of this and they don't want tier 1 rights at all, what do you have to go with? Is it even better to stick it on Ion Television or USA and USA is apparently re-upping their deal with wrestling, with the WWE and UFC. There's not a ton of linear space even left, even if you did have the money to cough up to give to the Pac-12. There's just not a ton of time slots left. And the longer that they wait, the more you got to ask yourself, what's going to happen here? And if you're those four corner schools and that you're going to get, you might have a game or two that could end up streaming, but you might not. When it comes to basketball, I mean, Arizona, yes, maybe so. But if you hear they're rebuilding that program pretty well. They've got Fisk is a good coach, right? Fick, great coach. I think he's rebuilding that from the bottom up. But if you're not getting any kind of visibility, how can you continue to attract good players to come into your program to be able to build up to that next level? Because right now, and I don't see how you could. I mean, if I'm Oregon and Washington, yeah, I probably want unequal revenue because we're the ones that are kind of driving that bus for a long time, that's left anyway. But that being said, I don't know that, what does that do to the rest of the conference? If you only are going to take care of two, what does it do for the rest of them? And no matter what, in the Big 12, they're going to maybe have a game or two that could be streamed, but the rest of them are going to be on the ESPN family of networks on television, linear, cable, whatever. So to me, I that's where I feel like the longer that this drags on, the more opportunity you have for somebody, and including like Coach Prime, they want to get him on television. There won't be a single game that they would get streamed if they were in the Big 12. Not a single game. And I don't care if they went 1-11 again, there wouldn't be a single game, and that would matter for him attracting recruits, right? So,
hey, Cody, before you go, let me catch this super chat. Larry, thank you so much for the contribution. If Utah joined the Big 12, they would start doing cancer research with Kansas due to conference affiliation. Curriculum between the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are different.
I don't know that you know that for sure. I don't know where you're getting that from, Larry. Tell us where that's coming from, because, if you're just hearing that from people like Altamore or, Wilner and Canzano, I'm gonna tell you I don't understand where you think that comes from, but that's just me.
I will say, with the last couple articles I've looked at by some of the guys that we've already mentioned, a few things that stand out to me. I see written way too many times for a guy that majored in journalism, and I haven't practiced it for a long, long time, but still, it appears that this is happening. Speculation is that I see that a lot in these articles. So anyway,
who are we talking about as far as?
I know we've talked about Dennis Dodd. I don't know if I got that from any of Pete Thamel's articles or anyone else. So I found that in a few places, and I'm just like, why don't you? I like to hear from who. What are we talking about? It appears where. It sounds like I'm listening to the national news on some of these news outlets these days. But anyway, yeah, Cody, if you want to, or if you want me to set you up, Cody, where I was going to go next was the Big 12 schools are earning $31.7 million per season on football, correct? I think that's the number. Who knows what the Pac-12 is going to come back with? Like we talked about before, there's got to be some kind of dividing line, I would think, that every athletic director and president have talked about it, have budgeted. If anything, we know that all these schools, man, they project budgets out 15 years. So they want to know what they're dealing with. And they know, hey, this comes in at 28.5. We're good. We're fine. That's, or whatever. Who knows what that is? So, are you guys still in that same place in regards to where are you in regards to what you think has to come back and it's combination money and exposure?
You're muted,
You're on
Cody.
mute, Cody.
I muted me. Oh, if the number is that close to the Big 12s, then the Pac-12, they live, they survive. That's great. But I haven't heard anything that would lead people to believe they're going to even maybe get in the 20s range. That seems to be my crux of this situation personally is, I mean, yes, you're hearing a lot of smoke and mirrors from all directions. But at the end of the day, some of the prognostications financially for the Pac-12, none of them. There's not a scenario out there that I can find that has them even within close to $5 million. And I know that's something y'all talked about the other day, right? But yeah, if it is that small of a margin, then great. The Pac-12 thrives. They could potentially add more members, so on and so forth. And this conversation was basically a moot point. I don't see how they can get there with streaming. Will streaming continue to be better? Yeah, I love streaming, right? I get it. It's very convenient. I love watching Oklahoma State softball, baseball, whatever, and you get a lot of that on streaming. So I'm very appreciative. But not only is it about the eyeballs for recruiting, not only is it about the dollar bills, but to me, what makes more sense than any of it is stability. The Big 12 is very stable at the moment. The Pac-12 seems to be grasping for stability. So even if you take out the financial side of things, that has to be, in my opinion, the most determining factor. But if it's within $5 million a school, then there's no need for the Pac-12 schools to even consider leaving, in my opinion. Right? Even if it's just for the cohesive nature of a conference. But if it's 10 million, 12 million, 13 million, I don't see how you could make it make sense if you're one of these presidents.
Right.
To extend on my thought about, again, perception of the negotiations not going the Pac-12's way, and again, I emphasize that's just my perception based on other negotiations, is that George Kliavkov made a tactical move. Now, he's not in the best position. He lost his marquee football brand, and then he lost about his third or fourth with USC and UCLA. So I don't envy him in any such way. But what I don't understand here is that most of these contracts were coming up, excluding the ACC, right around the same time. And instead of thinking we're in a vulnerable position, let's grab what territory we can first, they kind of seem to wait and see, well, the whole map got filled up. All the inventory got filled up. And now at the very best, it appears as though the Pac-12 is going to have their best game if ESPN forces them to give them their best game at 10:30 at night Eastern time and say,
and how can they do that?
Spot.
How does ESPN force that if Apple's paying the bill?
True. But my original point was, and this is not Monday morning quarterbacking, because I was saying this at the time, that the Pac-12, I would have thought when you're behind the others that you would grab what you can first.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is a lot of people are predicting recession. So if you know anything about a recession, most of these corporations and companies are like, okay, we got what we got. We're staying in pat. We're good. We need to know what the ledger is going to look like. They just told us from up above, from the very top, we're not spending any more money. We're going to lock it down. So that would not bode well for the Pac-12 either.
No, I agree. I think that, and that's where I feel like it all boils down to, is that moving forward, yeah, if you're headed for a media recession, there's just not a lot of opportunity that's already there. The fact that Brett Yormark jumped ahead once that negotiating window closed that the Pac-12 had, that it was an exclusive window, and they turned down the deal that the Big 12 took, then that came off the table. How much room is left? I mean, the truth is, unless you're able to go out there and get an Ion or a USA Network or a one of these small networks that nobody really knows that much about. Now there's a lot of coverage there. The CW, I mean, the CW is in every major market. Now, whether or not you're able to get the money that you need in the exposure, then I would do that if I'm the Pac-12 at this point, because that would potentially keep you together, and you would be able to get all your football on TV. How well it's produced and all that that remains to be seen. But I think that visibility is easily as important right here as the money, and probably more so because now money wise over the next few years, I think that's where you start running into problems, because as the Big 12, as the Big 10 and the SEC deals get going, we're talking about a huge gap, even between the Big 12 and the SEC. Even between the Big 12 and the Big 10, there's a big gap there. How long can you afford for that gap to be what it is? Is it all based on money? No. But if you don't have money and you don't have visibility, how in the world can you keep up if you're Utah or if you're Washington or Oregon, or if you were up and coming, hopefully an up and coming
of us
team?
Are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. My apologies. I did not mean to do that. Jason, I hope you can keep your train of thought.
I can shut it down. I can shut it down. Yeah. So in any event,
that's what I get for trying to preview something offline.
That's your shut up button, Jason. He installed that just for you.
That was just for me. I can shut up as soon as you're ready. No, listen, I just feel like the longer that this goes on, where you're that far behind the 8 ball, and if you don't at least have a linear partner for the next 3 or 4 years until everybody's so used to streaming, then you've got a problem for those schools that are trying to compete. And even if, I wouldn't tell you that I think Arizona and Arizona State don't deserve the opportunity to be able to compete. You're going to tell me that these new coaches like Jed Fisk and then you've got Dillingham, who took over at Arizona State. These guys expect to compete, right? Coach Prime expects to compete. Coach Whittingham expects to compete, and he's going to compete, But if you're not being seen, it's harder for you to be able to attract players,
Yes, everybody hit the like button. I appreciate everybody in the live chat that is saying hit the like button. So thank you so much for that. Truck Stop Gumby says, I paid $1,899.99 to push the like button. Well, Truck Stop Gumby, since you are a YouTube member here, I do appreciate that. I didn't know I was charging quite that much. That must be the highest tier we have. That's not too bad.
That's pretty awesome.
Stuff. Yeah.
I need you to please come join my deal.
Mark, you need to start teaching us how you pull this off, man.
No. I am not the guy. I'm trying to learn from others. Believe me, I have not mastered YouTube. The algorithms still have me perplexed. I'll say that.
Me too.
This whole thing, sometimes it's a fickle mistress. It treats you that way anyways.
Absolutely. Let me ask you guys, I want to respect your time. Do you guys want to take any comments or questions, or any people jumping on here with any questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I got a few.
Most of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun. You get to socialize, you get entertained, and in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address, they want your phone number, they want your place of employment, and they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it, they're going to sell it, they're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance. It's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago, and there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password-keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me, and now for my Voice of College Football community. All right. Again, we thank Aura. They came to me for a sponsorship a few weeks ago, and I said, you know what the deal is? This is funny because about a year ago, I signed up with you. They didn't even know that. All right, good stuff. We've got a couple calls on the line. We got Wild Ute joining us here. Wild Ute, what's going on tonight?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good.
Very well.
Hey,
Very well. How about yourself?
Doing well. Happy Friday.
Yes, it is. It is.
All right. So Jason and Cody, question for you guys, okay? Ute fan here, okay?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you die hard and try to mitigate some concerns, all right? That's really kind of what I have a conversation around, because I've been thinking about this, okay? So obviously it seems like there's going to be a movement. Arizona, Colorado over the next couple weeks to a couple months, but there's some momentum right now going on. As a Ute fan, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. We might go to the Big 12. We might stay. There's a lot of uncertainty. That's just kind of where it is right now. But I guess like as a Ute fan, I do have a concern about the Big 12, okay? And let's just talk about this because I haven't heard anyone really speak to it. But I think that Brett Yormark is kind of like a Steve Jobs, right? Like he really changed the Big 12 in so many ways from Bowlesby. I mean, Bowlesby was more of like that traditional power conference leader and stuff, and he kind of ran like almost like a horse and buggy type of conference. Then Yormark comes in here and has changed everything. Mm-hmm. He's made the Big 12 hot, like white hot, okay? I guess as a Ute fan, considering going over to the Big 12, how long is Yormark really truly going to be in the Big 12? You can't answer that, but like, is he such an innovative leader that the Big 12 kind of goes back to its old ways when he leaves? Because I'm thinking everything that he's done, he's put together this Big 12 Rucker Park, Big 12 Mexico. He's got Shaq DJing at events. I mean, this is some serious. Serious stuff. Like he is an amazing leader. But like, say that he goes to a pro sports league next year. Like, what happens with the Big 12? So that's first thought. The second thought is the Big 12 more about Yormark right now and his branding than the schools? Because I'm looking at the schools and the Big 12 schools, like a new school like BYU and everything, and like, your Kansas schools and everything. It seems like Yormark's almost brought that New York type of swagger.
Yeah.
And everything. Is that possible to persist when he leaves? Those are like some long-term questions I've got for you guys.
Well, first of all, don't you wish that evil upon us, Ricky Bobby. Don't do that. Don't do that. To the second point, honestly, if Brett Yormark were to exit next season, I think anybody that would get up here and say that we're all well and good, that's not fair. That's not accurate, right? Brett Yormark, Brett Yormark we trust. It's a saying going around the Big 12. It's legitimate because he is that good. Now, I think it would take a lot for him to leave because of he basically helped pull us out of the pits of despair, right? And for him to be able to attach himself to the Big 12, and let's just say that the Big 12 does in fact incorporate more teams and they continue to have more success and we knock out more contracts, he's going to put himself in a spot that is very rare, like almost Greg Sankey rarefied air, if he can continue to chip down at that wall. So if we are able to capitalize, I don't know that he would leave anytime soon. At least that would be my hope and prayer. If he does leave, yeah, I think we'd be scrambling a little bit again.
What I would tell you, even if he did, I think that for people that have been fans of the Big 12 for as long as Cody and I have, the Big 12 would not be okay with going back to Bob Bowlesby or somebody like him, right? And I think that the horse is kind of out of the barn when it comes to that, or the toothpaste is out of the tube, whatever you want to say. That's not going to happen again. And I don't think that happens again throughout college football. When you start looking at what just happened with the Big Ten hiring Petiti, same kind of deal. This is a guy that had been involved with Major League Baseball and was a TV guy rather than a guy that came up through those athletic director ranks within conferences and stuff like that to become the next commissioner. With the changing landscape of media within college football, college sports in general, I don't think that you're probably going to see a lot of that coming back to, guys that, and even for that matter, George Kliavkoff was with MGM. He wasn't and it's not working out as well as you would like it to for the Pac-12, I think. But I don't think that has a lot of it doesn't have much to do with George as much as it has to do with what happened with Larry Scott. So I think that you're not really going to see I don't think that you're going to see the Big 12 go back to, even if Yormark were to leave, I think that they're going to, there's other guys out there that are making names for themselves in the sports landscape, professional sports, that kind of deal, that I think that there would be the opportunity to go do that. Now, whether or not he's going to leave sooner or later, I mean, I think that that's a fair question. But I don't think that forward thinking that you're starting to see with Yormark is something that the Big 12 would allow to walk out the door with him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. So really you think that it's more sustainable?
I do think it's a sustainable thing. And I don't know, some people, don't necessarily agree with doing the Mexico thing or whatever. And not everything is necessarily going to work. But I think just having that forward thinking of, we can do different things to make this more attractive as a conference, and I still say that, when you start talking about CU, and I know that they haven't done anything in a long time, and I get that. And I don't know how long that Coach Prime hangs around, but a guy like Coach Prime with a guy like Brett Yormark that's like media gold, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that any amount, and I feel like with Utah, and I understand that Ute fans and BYU fans are not on the same page with a lot of this stuff, and I get it. Me and Cody aren't on the same page about much when it comes to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. I call them Okie Light for a reason. And sorry, Cody, not sorry. But the truth is that would be huge for the Big 12. That would immediately become, the Holy War would immediately become the biggest, rivalry game in the sport, or in the conference especially. And to me, that's important. I think, when you listen to Bob Thompson, he talks about that a lot, that what drives this sport is rivalries. It's not market size. It isn't any of that kind of stuff. It's not even academics. What drives this sport is rivalry games, and that would be huge. So I think that if you were able to make a move, if you see that move happen with the Four Corner schools, I don't see a way that this gets worse necessarily. Now, can you stop that, the bus that's driving, or the train that's coming down the tracks in the SEC and the Big Ten? I don't know. But I also think that when you start looking at things like, nobody's thought about pulling the basketball separate from football. And I don't understand that why that hasn't been a thought, because when you start looking at the NCAA tournament, and I realize it's the tournament that makes all that money, but if you go back, to whenever I was a kid, Big Monday was important to me, in college basketball. And then it turned to Super Tuesday, and almost every day of the week, your Thursday basketball games. People love college basketball too. So I think that is definitely a marketable, particularly within the Big 12, which already is the best basketball conference in the country. They start adding, schools like Gonzaga to the mix. You add Arizona to the mix. You add even Arizona State with Bobby Hurley being their head coach. They were one of the better teams in the Pac-12. That's adding to your brand there. And so you could keep up football-wise because you don't have to put as much of your football revenue back into basketball, if that makes sense. So that's just my thoughts on it. And I think that now that you've gone in that direction, this is a copycat world. You're going to continue seeing people that are going to do things that way. I don't think that they ever go back to the Bob Bowlesby ways. And I would hope that's the case. If you want the Big 12 to stay relevant, you can't go back to Bob Bowlesby.
Yeah, the Big 12 is becoming more attractive. I can tell you that. By the hour, it seems like. And I've been a huge Pac supporter, and I really think that a huge selling point for Utah fans, maybe for other Four Corner fans, like is this the start of the third super conference? Because of course Utah's going to want to be in that third super conference, and if that's the Big 12's vision, and it's going to wait until the ACC disbands to go after the top ACC brands they can. To form this third super conference, and that's something that Utes are going to want to be a part of, at least. So,
yeah. Well, the entire ACC can't go to the Big 12 or to the Big 10 in the SEC. So, there's going to be some brands that would definitely have to go to the Big 12, I would think.
Well, and if I may, even more so than a vision, if we're able to hold on to Brett Yormark, I don't think it's just a vision. I think it's legitimately something that's already kind of in the works. If the Pac-12 doesn't get within, let's just say, $10 million of the current deal for the Big 12, which is right around 32 a pop, if that doesn't happen, I just do not see how we can continue to have a conversation about a multitude of conferences. You're already hearing conversation, or we've been hearing conversation about potentially having a Super 2, right? I don't think that would be good for college football. And I think that the powers that be 100% know that. But at the same time, there is going to be that whether it's metaphorical or figuratively or not, that line in the sand. I don't see how we haven't already begun seeing that those dominoes begin to fall. The waiting game by the Pac-12, to me, just shows more illegitimacy at the moment, unfortunately. And I don't like it for the Pac-12. I do think George Kliavkoff probably should have not thrown as many shots towards the Big 12 way. If that didn't happen, there would be zero animosity whatsoever between the Pac-12 contingent and the Big 12 contingent. So Kliavkoff is responsible for stirring up the pot. And if it is true that the presidents have more say than he does, then that's probably indicative of why he hasn't been talking a whole lot recently.
Yeah. Well, good stuff, guys. Thanks for letting me jump on.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you being here. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot for coming on.
Next call coming in from our buddy Larry. Larry, what's going on tonight? Hey, Larry, you with us?
Hi, Larry.
Larry, we've got another call. So going once, going twice. Larry. Oh, okay,
I'm here.
Larry.
I'm
there
here.
Sorry. There he is.
Sorry, had the mic off, guys. Great show. So, it's kind of like this is a football, not an academic show, right? So it's hard as a football fan. I'm a Utah guy, obviously, and so Utah is just I'm a Utah fan. I'm a football fan, but you have to look at everything from both spectrums. It's a university first with athletics.
Of course it
and
is.
so where do they butter their bread? And like we're talking about, are they going to lose money by going here or there? Well, if Stanford goes to the Big Ten, I guarantee you Stanford is going to get more aligned with Michigan and Michigan State and Ohio State. So it's just one of those things. I mean, if you barbecue with your neighbor and you move across, the state, you're not going to barbecue with your neighbor. Sure, you could get on, you could go do that, but you're going to get in with your new neighbors. And so what we think would happen, I don't know. Baylor's very tied to Texas when it comes to medical research.
They are.
Yeah, I think they share some of the same medical
Texas medical
facilities.
system. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I have no clue about that setup. And like you were saying, I was telling you, Kansas, if Utah went to, it's due to curriculum. If Utah went to the Big 12, I would almost guarantee you, because if you know anything about John Huntsman, they're big into the cancer. They would automatically, Kansas would benefit from Utah, because I guarantee you Utah would share research with Kansas, and the man has given over $1 billion to cancer research to the University of Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about a $28 million athletic budget or a media contract, this man's given over $1 billion.
Right.
So,
but I don't think that's going to stop, though. I'm not in agreement with you on that part of it, that it's going to stop just because they move to the Big 12 with their football team.
What I'm saying is they're going to barbecue with their new neighbors. I mean, to put it in a layman's term,
one isn't connected to the other, though.
They're not. But right now, Stanford, Cal, and Washington share a lot of the same research, patents, technological within those schools. They share a lot of resources. Mm-hmm. If those teams went to the Big Ten, they're going to share those with the Big Ten consortium. Does that make sense? Like, it's not that they couldn't with Utah, but you're going to want to build a stronger neighborhood. Is all I'm saying.
The neighborhood is the AAU. It's not the Pac-12 or the Big 12. It's the neighborhood. That's different. AAU.
AAU is federal grants. You have private grants.
Okay.
Outside of Apple, how much did Apple give to Stanford? Apple gave so much money to Stanford. Eccles Foundation, John Huntsman, they've given over, I think just within the last 2 years, they've given, what was it, $200 million in private grant money, not federal.
Okay. Yeah.
So AAU and your other, they're two different groups. So there's a difference between an AAU and a private
I get it. I get all that. And I wouldn't tell you that. Look, I'm not going to speculate on that stuff. And I don't know that that's necessarily the case. What I would tell you is that I don't see why you would stop if you're already, the neighbors. It's not like you're actually moving the school. So the neighbors really don't change. You're still neighbors with California. You just like right now, Kansas is already doing research work with the Big Ten. They're not in the Big Ten, but they do research work with the Big Ten. So, and I know that a lot of people like to, that they're a prime candidate to go to the Big Ten, and they could be, except for the fact that their basketball matters to them. That's their claim to fame. Now, obviously, if the money's huge enough for them to make that move or whatever, I could see them doing that. Right. I could see them making that move. And I wouldn't say that anybody in the Big 12 necessarily wouldn't hop and, to the SEC immediately or the Big 10 if they have the opportunity, right? Because you just don't know. And I don't know what's going to happen with the Pac-12 either. What I do know is if for those people that are concerned about what's going to happen with their athletic programs, you should be concerned right now because you don't have a linear partner. And I know that it's about more than athletics. I get that. It is about more than athletics. It absolutely is. But the truth of it is when we're talking about athletic conferences and we're talking about athletic dollars and visibility, it's not about anything more than athletics.
Right,
It's
but
about
how
that.
can now hold on. The biggest issue I've had is you have no TV deal, you should jump. You have no TV deal, you should jump. Well, we're hearing nobody's in on this. We're hearing this, we're hearing that. Until we actually get some real crap, it's like you need to jump because of this. It's almost like a peer pressure move by the Big 12, and you're like, well,
I don't
that's
think
what
that
it feels like. That's what I'm saying. It feels like a peer pressure. You don't have a TV deal. Well, they have a TV deal for 14 months. So there's no
Sometimes-
need to feel like you have to jump right now. But I get what you're saying.
I'm not
To
saying they
me-
have to jump. I'm saying that at some point you're going to have to jump, you know?
Right,
I
and
mean, and are you able to hold on? The point I'm making is okay, so if you're a four corner school and you know that right now you don't, because if they had a deal that was palatable for the conference, they'd have signed it by now. Right? They would have signed it by now.
Not when
If-
ESPN is playing the game they're playing.
That means
I mean,
it's not palatable, right? I've said if it was a palatable deal, something that the conference can accept, and if they really want to stay together and it's a good enough deal for them, then no, you would have already signed it. Now, obviously, there's not a palatable deal.
well,
Now,
especially now.
will there be more of one? Will there be more of one in a year from now or 14 months from now, like you're saying? I don't know, maybe. But if you're one of these four corner schools, and I get the way that Utah feels, I understand what you're saying on that. My thing is that okay, what about these other schools? You know, we're not hearing the same things coming from Arizona and Arizona State. We're not hearing the same things coming from Colorado, and Colorado does a lot of money every year. And I mean, they're right up there near the top in research dollars. Right.
And that
And
they've
they
only
added a
done that
ton.
because, like Tony told you, because they joined the Big 12, their research money.
They did
jumped.
that because they turned to AAU when they got into the Pac-12.
Right.
They got it. It was the AAU. Stop putting it about the conference, man. It's not the conference. It's the freaking
How did they get
AAU.
into the AAU? How did they get into the AAU?
They applied for it when they got into the conference. They applied
Right.
for
And
it.
who
They built
votes?
up their-
Who votes? Who votes to put you in the AAU? It's not Texas Tech. It's not Baylor.
Well, then how did Kansas get in? How did
And
Kansas?
why
get
did
in?
Iowa State just leave?
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, there's votes.
The votes part? But okay. But
there's a
one of these
political.
schools-
What
they're
I'm
one
saying,
of
there's
these
a
schools that is
political
actually
side.
talking
There is a
about-
political side to the AAU. Yeah, hold on. You've talked for 5 minutes. Can I talk for like 20 seconds? There's a side of the AAU that is political. You and I have no clue how the hell that works.
Okay.
I don't pretend to know how AAU works, other than I know it's political.
But
So
they
I'm not
were
going to
in the
sit here
AAU is the point I was
and
making.
argue
That's
that.
all I said. That's all I said was that it was the AAU move, not the Pac-12. And they're still going to be in the AAU if they go back to the Big 12.
Right. They got into a better neighborhood academically. AAU is academically. They got into a better neighborhood. So that's all I'm saying. Look, I'm just a football fan, and I don't get to decide where my team goes. I just understand that my university really looks at academics very high, and I don't think they shun the Big 12. It's just a different curriculum, different resources. And I honestly think they're trying to get into the Big 10. If I'm being honest, I think they're trying to hang on.
Everything I've heard is there's no chance in hell that they get into the Big 10.
And they may not. They may not. Yeah, I'm not saying right now, no. Right now, no. What if Utah gets into 4 straight CFPs? Are they in the conversation
Possibly.
in 5 years?
Are they going to do that? Are you going to do that from the pack if you've lost anything out of that? That's the question. The only thing that my question is how long does the Pac-12 stay together?
I don't see past 5 years. I'll agree. I don't see past 5 years.
If none of these guys leave right now, none of them, and you stick in there, and then the second that the Big 10 pops in and says, hey, we want those 4 schools, and it's not going to, who those 4 schools are going to be. It's going to be Oregon, Washington, Stanford, and Cal. It's not going to be any of the 4 corner schools that we've talked about. It's not obviously going to be Washington State or Oregon State. It's going to be those other 4 schools. So
it could be Notre Dame.
It could also
Stanford and Washington and
yeah,
Oregon and Cal are
or it
sitting
could
there.
be
Yeah.
it could be Florida State. It could
Right.
be, you know, there's
Yeah.
any number of things that could happen that they're going to definitely go for certain schools before other schools. My thing is if you're hoping to stay competitive, it's not, I mean, we could talk about academics all day if you want to. And because the truth is, you're right, nobody really knows. And the PAC ALC consortium and all that other stuff, look, Tony, I get it. I know that you feel that way on there. I see that.
If only we had a chart.
I'm telling you, we've seen your chart. But I got to tell you that I don't see that has a whole lot to do with what's happening with all these television contracts. And maybe you don't care about the television contract, but if you don't, then you don't care about staying competitive in college football. That's
right.
what
See,
I'm trying to get. It's got to be one or the other.
Yeah. See, that's exactly the point, is what does your university value? And athletics to the University of Utah is a dime. The research and the academics are the dollar. And so what are they willing to do?
What about you as a fan of the athletic program?
I support my university because my kids go to that university.
Okay.
I follow the football team because I love them and I'm from Utah. And, you know, but my kids went to the University of Utah. So I support the academic side and the athletic side. So I don't have to make those decisions, but I respect it. I mean, I respect you guys and I get what you're saying. I don't disagree. It's just I'm standing on the other side of the fence.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Tony, you can talk about you're competitive right now. Today, you're competitive, Tony. You're not. You're 4 years from now or 2 years from now.
4 months from now.
See. Yeah. How is it going to be then? Once USC and UCLA break off, and then what? Then what happens? And you weren't. And you know what? Being ranked because you played all Pac-12 competition isn't the same thing. Sit over there and do this from the comment section instead of showing up.
Well, it certainly was a strong year for the Pac-12 by Pac-12 standards. This has arguably been the worst conference in football in the last 6 or 7 years.
Play anybody out of the conference, really. The ones that they got beat.
Now, when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, the Pac-12 was arguably some years the best conference in college football. But for the last 6 or 7 years, it's arguably been the worst, but had a resurgence this past year. It was a strong year for the conference, but that's quarterback driven. And I don't think those quarterbacks are necessarily they don't have legacy. They're not NFL quarterbacks that are going to stick around for 10 or 12 years. So yeah, it's not looking good for the Pac-12 from a football standpoint. Obviously, they're losing their best brand that's really taking off right now with Lincoln Riley. And of course, UCLA has a lot of potential.
Yeah. Well, I'll let somebody else in, Mark. Hey, guys, you guys are great. I appreciate you.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Larry.
Larry, I appreciate your conversation all the time.
Good call, wet blanket. The Big 12 did just play for a natty. And yeah, we got our head kicked in. It didn't look great for the conference. But again, if you're talking about a differentiation between the Big 12,
USC got beat by Tulane.
If you're talking about the Big 12 and potentially catching the Big 10, to me, that's more of a relevant conversation as to whether the Pac-12 is going to catch the Big 12 as it sits at the moment.
My thoughts about the Big 12 is because of what has transpired in the last close to 2 years, OU, Texas leaving, and the 4 additions, which I think are fascinating in regards to how are they going to compete. I've done all sorts of videos trying to look at recent past. How are they projecting forward? You know, if Houston could lock down the football players in that city, shoot, they would be a force to be reckoned with, and on and on and on. I think they're all 4 going to be competitive.
Sure.
What I see out of the Big 12 is I see a conference going forward that is going to be the most fascinating and the most balanced top to bottom.
I agree with you.
I know Iowa State wasn't very good last year, but they were the worst team in the conference, and they were the worst team in the conference in college football by far.
Right, because they had the best. Close. They had a top 10 defense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone has their Rutgers and Vandy's, but those programs really don't exist in the Big 12. The Big 12 has a high floor. Mm-hmm. However, projecting forward, I don't see an elite program emerging in the Big 12 to compete with Georgia, Ohio State on down the line, those elite programs. I just don't see it with Oklahoma and Texas leaving. And that's what people are focused on. They're not junkies like me that would love to see a conference full of 9-3 and 8-4 teams playing really good football games every week, where I'm like, I don't know who's going to win these games, versus watching Big Ten games where 3 games decide the whole conference every year between 3 teams. And that's your conference. That's your season. Where the conference championship game doesn't even mount to anything because we know who's going to win it every year. I'd rather go in with a conference that's balanced and fun and competitive every week. But you guys know what the deal is. People are hyper focused on the playoff.
Of course.
Sure.
And that's where the schools, we could all run them down. There's only about 4 or 5 of them at this point, run the sport and have for a long time. And that's just where I see the issue with the Big 12. I don't see a program that has that ability in a stretch of time. Oklahoma State did it in 2011. They were arguably the 2nd or 3rd best team in college football, and maybe the best. And they should have had a shot at playing for the BCS championship. TCU got into the playoff, pulled off an upset. We're playing for a national championship. But in this 12-team playoff, take that TCU season. While the 12-team playoff is going to afford more teams with an opportunity, this is a godsend for Penn State. Schools like that are just right below the line. Notre Dame, Penn State. Penn State, I think, is probably the best example. A godsend for Penn State.
Absolutely.
And others. However, it's going to afford them the opportunity to make the playoff, but it's going to make it much more difficult to win a national championship. So where TCU made the Final Four and they put together a really good game, they knocked off Michigan fair and square. I don't care what anyone says.
I agree.
They still were miles away from actually winning the national championship. Whereas 2 years from now, they're going to have to win in that same situation. They're going to have to win 4 games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
it's not getting
impossible.
Easier. It's not going to get easier. And that's the whole, and I think you're right about that. And I think that's where, if you were watching Josh Pate on Sunday, he was talking about, don't get the idea that this is going to be, that this is about the best teams in the playoff necessarily, because it's not going to be, because you can't tell me that minus or with what the Pac-12 will be after the 23 season, if it stays the same, that winning that conference is the same thing as winning the SEC or the Big Ten. It's not the same thing. And so I don't know. I feel like, yes, I agree with you. You're going to have to get through a gauntlet of 4 games, but I think that's where I said before, I feel like you're moving to more of a professional model. I don't know that you can stop that train completely, whether you're the Pac-12 or the Big 12, even for that matter. I think that the Big 12 is definitely in a better position to stay alive for longer, but yes. I don't know that it continues forever. I don't, just because of the money and the way that it's going. And again, maybe this TV recession is the saving grace for some of these smaller conferences that now you're going to fall terribly far behind the Big Ten and the SEC money wise, but I don't know that that's a whole lot different than it ever was. That being said, getting into the CFP will be a boost of cash. It will be. So, that would be big as well. But I'm just, I'll tell you what, I think that some of these teams would behoove to playing in the Big 12 because of the fact that you're right, top to bottom, there's a ton of parity there. You're going to have from season to season, you're going to see some differences. And I think that Houston finally getting into, once Holgerson's probably out of there, because I think that's coming. But I really do feel like that's probably coming. You can see that there's some issues going on there, right? But that's fertile recruiting grounds in that area, right? And now that they're in a power conference, you're going to see some of those kids stay home. And then UCF, I mean, gosh, I mean, they're already doing great recruiting wise there in Florida, and now they're in a big conference. How long is it going to take for them to get very good?
The ACC should have grabbed them. If you guys have time, there's one other caller on the line.
Sure.
Yeah. It's Bedlam softball. It's third inning, so I got some time.
Okay. I want to respect you guys and your time here. We got Jason, we got Cody. We want to make sure everybody, we will run down their outlets here in just a second so everybody can catch up with Jason and Cody. We appreciate you guys stopping by. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Oh, hey, Mark.
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Nice to hear the different ideas being thrown out, and it's kind of good to get different perspectives too. I think I'm glad you have. I don't know if they're guest hosts or just visitors, but I think it always makes a better show when we have different perspectives. I guess.
Are you trying to kick me out the door?
No, definitely not.
Taking over the channel.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
I just mean in terms of like even who's the last guy that called in. I kind of like to. I haven't really heard from him a whole lot, but
absolutely,
just to hear different alternatives, because I think ultimately, I don't know that any. I think we've already kind of mentioned it. Not one person really. I don't know. Honestly, I'm kind of confused about what the realignment. What's even kind of. You say it's the playoff. I'm not. I mean, just from my perspective, again, I'm not convinced it's all about I don't know that there's a whole lot of money in the playoff. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, just because of no.
Why do you make that statement, Chris?
Well, you said they're campus games, Mark. That's not gonna draw like. I mean, yeah, it'll make it easier to host the game. It'll make it maybe easier to show the game, and it'll draw television. But it's not gonna. I don't think that the playoffs have proven to be that. They're not like a huge. From what we used to. I mean, I know that's true because.
Where does the money come from, Chris? Where does the money come from?
Well, okay, ESPN, but I mean, they pay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And props to them, I guess.
It doesn't matter where they're playing the games.
Props to them for putting the money on the line. Ultimately, I mean, it's the bottom line, I guess, is whether people want to go and participate. But I'm not going to throw ESPN under the bus because they're doing the right thing, but. I don't know. It's like they say, we'll do playoffs. Everybody will be, I think the only people that care are the people that are, involved, but that's another argument for another day. But
Chris, what is your point?
Well, I'm trying to make a point, Mark. It's just that, they say it's because of the playoffs that we're having. I don't know if that's really true. I think what they're trying to do is these conferences are trying to put the best product they can on the field. I mean, that's ultimately any business would do that. I mean, so if the Big 12 is looking, and I have to be honest with you, I personally don't think, except for Houston, and even that one I'm not completely sure about. I don't know that the Big 12 got any better by adding those 4 schools. They didn't get any worse, but I don't know that they necessarily got any better.
Chris, I understand your point that they didn't add 4 powerhouses, but you have to consider the situation that they were in. They had to solidify their conference. They just lost their 2 biggest members in the conference, and they were down to 8 schools.
Sure.
They had to solidify themselves, or they would have had all their conference members looking at other options in other conferences. So they did the very best that they could and actually took in the 4 best options that they had.
Okay. Well, I'm not debating that, Mark. They probably did the best they could, but I think 8-team conferences, that's still a viable conference, even if you limit it to 8. But that's what the Big East used to have, was 8.
Used to. That's the point.
The Big East isn't.
Major point. They no longer exist.
Yeah, they do.
There is no Big East football conference.
Not in football, they don't.
Connecticut's in the Big East. But anyway.
Chris,
they're not in the
Let's
Big
stick to
East in
facts.
football, though.
Yes, they are.
we can't have a conversation if we don't stay with what is factual, Chris.
Okay, well, I'm doing the best I can. So
There's no Big East football conference. It's not 2001.
they have an independent Big East member, but whatever. I mean, I don't know that I want to argue about that because I know that's true. But anyway, I have a better idea, I think, and I'm gonna put it on the line, Mark. I'm sorry. I think my idea is better than anybody else's. I think I just, whether people want to use it or not, I guess that's okay too. But what ought to happen instead of bringing in 12 or to get to 12, I guess, is they should have cut ties with West Virginia. I don't think West Virginia belongs in the Big 12. I guess bringing in Houston was probably a good thing. But then UCF, what was it? Cincinnati and BYU should have stayed where they were, or at least not. And then just join the SEC. There you go. There you go. That's your.
Whoa. The SEC has to want. The SEC has to want you.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I think that would have been a better thing than just pick 2 out of the 12 or 2 out of the 10. I think if you put the 2 together, I think you get a better combination than just adding 2 anyway. And plus, we're talking about realignment, and I don't know where it stops personally. I just don't know. I'm just being honest, but I don't think it's a stretch to say they might include as many as 24. So that's where it goes. I mean, just put the 2 together, and there you got your 24. Without really.
You called the other night. We had this conversation. What did I tell you about conference expansion? I told you that the main component, a conference, is very simple. It's complicated beyond this, but the final decision's pretty simple. They evaluate that school to determine, is that football program, that athletic brand, going to add value to our conference? The SEC is not adding Iowa State.
Well,
or a number of other schools.
I'm just telling you what I know, Mark. I'm not trying to say, I know I'm not working for the SEC, but I did the math. I mean, whether you want to look at my math and say it's wrong or whatever, but that's probably the best thing they could consider was just to include everybody. And then, that way you get to 24 and you're not it's not addition by subtraction. You're not losing. I mean, in fact, I sent that information to you. They're probably not completely as good as they would be if they just left where they were, but they're a solid conference if they do that. It's they're not going to lose. They're not going to lose anything. I mean, that would be the smartest thing they could do. And then as far as the Big Ten goes, I already told you, I think Penn State, Rutgers, and Maryland are better suited to the Big East anyway. So you cut ties with them. You bring in Colorado.
There is no Big East.
Yes, there is.
There's not a Big East football conference. What are we talking about?
Connecticut is a Big East conference member. And if you want to keep lying to me and tell me it's not
a football conference.
When we are contemplating starting a Voice of college football history channel, you are going to be invited to jump on and we can talk about what was going on in 2004.
Let everybody know that so they're all aware that Connecticut isn't in the Big East. That'll be really interesting to hear that, because I think Connecticut knows they're in the Big East, so that's ridiculous.
Not in football, they're not. They're not in football. They don't play football in the Big East Conference. They don't have a Big East football conference.
Yes, they are. They are in the Big East.
Oh, my goodness. Mark.
Well, who else do they play in the Big East?
They're an independent in football because they're the only participating member of the Big East, but they're still in the Big East. Saying they're not is just being retarded. They are. No, I don't care if you're done with it or not. I'm telling you the truth, and you're telling me I'm wrong.
I tell you what, Mark, you ain't got a hair on you if you don't hire Chris to be your next position.
Well, I'm kind of tired of being told I'm wrong when I'm right.
You're not right.
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
Connecticut's in the Big. The reason they're in the Big East is they're invited to join the American Athletic Conference, and they turned them down. They said no.
Chris,
they're in the Big East basketball conference. The Big East is only a basketball conference, bud. That's it.
No, Connecticut's in the Big East, and they play football.
It's only a basketball conference, dude.
No, that's not true.
Can I hire you to argue with my old lady? Please?
I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm trying to tell you where you're wrong. That doesn't really matter.
With me.
Chris,
I'm not arguing with you.
Go to any major sports site, go to any major college football site, and look up the 2022 football standings and find the Big East Conference standings. Find those for us.
They're in the Big East and they play football. I don't know.
Find us the website that lists the Big East standings for the 2022 season.
Well, Connecticut's in the Big East, so
they don't exist.
Yes, they do. It's kind of ridiculous, Mark, that you wouldn't know that. You live there, but whatever. Anyway, well, I mean, come on. Anyway,
well, Chris, thanks for stopping by tonight.
All right.
Please, next time, let's talk in reality.
I am dealing in reality. That's the saddest part is that you're not listening to reality. I'm telling you what I know, and you can argue with me. The other thing is, I think if they included those schools, the ones I told you, that would get them up to 12. It would.
Who won the Big East College Football Championship last year?
Championship, Connecticut. Who won? Well, it would be Connecticut because they actually won the national championship too in basketball.
Who
In the Big East,
We're
yes.
not talking about basketball. We're talking about the football league. Who finished in last place in the Big East last year then?
I don't know, Mark. You tell me. You live there. I don't
It
live
doesn't
there.
matter where we live. Where it's the age of the internet. You can be in China and you can look this up. It
You
doesn't
might
matter
want
where you
to
live.
call Connecticut and remind them that they don't play in the Big East and tell them, because I think that's something they'd like to know, like to hear about.
I'm just asking you to repeat the standings from last season. But thank you for being here, Chris.
All right. Thank you too.
All right.
That was spectacular.
Aren't you
Spectacular,
guys
brother man.
glad you stuck around for that one?
I feel dumber for this. I feel dumber for being on that call. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry.
Hey, that made my
No,
day.
that's okay.
That made my day. I felt like I was living in a bizarro world there for a second, but it was a good time.
Chris calls me on a regular basis, and that's pretty much run of the mill.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad that we could meet.
I'm glad you let him in.
Because
I
it's
thought he
good.
was
That's
just
good
going to
time.
ask a basic question about, maybe what you guys thought was going to happen with realignment or something. I don't know.
No, that's good stuff,
You
man.
thought
That's
you thought your main man Chris was going to keep it simple this one time, did you?
I was hoping this would be the first. Maybe you guys had some kind of special magic that some magic fairy dust
Oh
that was
my
going to
gosh.
straighten him out.
I think he's got magic fairy dust, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's what it is.
That's what it is. He does have it. I'm right. Yeah, you're right.
Oh man.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation. You guys
Absolutely.
made
Thanks
a whole
for
lot of
having us, man.
sense. And I guess the bottom line is I kind of live in this world. I live in the world of, okay, there are a lot of things that we know for sure.
Yeah.
Like there is no Big East football conference anymore. There was at one point. There are certain things that are facts. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are all sorts of people out there running around making stuff up and lying and throwing crap against the wall. But hopefully we live mostly in this middle portion because we already know what the facts are, where we throw these conversations together and we discuss and we look at TV ratings and we look at brands and we look at academics and if they count and we look at all these various factors and we have a logical conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we agree probably 90% of the time, and 10% we express our thoughts and our opinions, and we learn from the other people in the room, and we may change our mind a little bit. We may not, but that's all right. That's cool. So good conversation with both of you. Jason, appreciate you being here. We want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you.
Yeah, you can find the show is at CFB -pod on YouTube, obviously. You can find me on Twitter as always at BirdieManDub, and then our website, which is getting up and going, is hofmedia.us.
Would love to have you stop by sometime. Jason, talk some Oklahoma football with us.
Absolutely enjoy it.
Larry, thank you for the contribution. Appreciate that. Mark, please convince Chris to call Uncle Lou. Okay,
Uncle Lou, that would be funny.
Mark, I'm going to be 100% honest with you, man. If you would have told me before this started that we could have been talking about Big East football this whole flipping time, why did we even talk Big 12, Pac-12? It makes no sense.
I agree, man. It was much more fun.
Next time we get Chris on the line, first thing,
It'll
and
be the
3
Big
hours
Mac
later,
versus
we're
Big
still going to
East.
be trying to convince him that there's no Big East conference.
That's hilarious.
I don't know if anybody's going to be listening to us other than Chris, but at that point, but
Hey, and Tony, don't forget
Everybody-
horns down.
Everybody in Big East football country, they'll be tuned in.
Cody, thanks so much for stopping by and making this work tonight. Appreciate
Yeah,
you.
thank
Would love to have you come on to talk some Cowboys with us. Let folks know where they can find you.
So I'm on Twitter at Aldeo Stages to see there. I like to call myself a hoot and a half whenever I find the time. And then I have a daily football podcast, obviously Locked On Oklahoma State. Feel free to swing in there as well. And I also do some traveling 7-on-7 circuit film analysis and things of that nature that I try to stay as busy as possible. Yeah, somebody just updated OU's up by 1, top of the 5th. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, it's go time.
Okay. All right. Well, we would love to have a camera on you all night to take you down to like the 3-2 count in the last inning to see you go crazy.
I may have
regardless of
gone
what
through a couple
we
of
discuss.
phones and pieces of sheetrock in my day, maybe.
Yeah. Listen,
Nice.
especially going up against that
You gonna
against
say
that
something
juggernaut
stupid?
of
You gonna say
Oklahoma.
something dumb? But you was about to call us Okie Light again, huh? Wasn't you?
No.
Okay.
I didn't say okay
All right.
light. Did
All
I?
right. I can't tell because the glare in your glasses can't let me see in your eyeballs. You're hiding your eye pupils from me, buddy.
It's not okay. Yes, it is okay
No,
light.
no,
I'm
no,
sorry. It's always okay light to me. Come on.
See, I needed you to go there so I could let the fine people out there know on Mark's show that the reason that the Sooner fans try to call us Okie Light is because spelling the whole word of Oklahoma, so it's like way too many syllables.
Oh, okay. Nice. Well done. Well, we can both agree on this right there. All
Yes, sir.
right. All right, guys.
Appreciate
Thanks a lot
you
for
too.
having us on. We appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. You
Awesome.
guys have a great night. Thanks
too,
for doing
sir.
it.
Uh-huh.
Go Pokes. Appreciate you.
All right. Awesome to have Cody and Jason with us tonight. Great conversation on the Big 12 and the possibilities of a Pac-12 split. And you know the deal, folks. You guys listen to it and talk it every day. And we just, again, had a great time talking college football with them. And I was thinking about doing this tonight, but I think we'll hold off until Saturday. Sometime over the weekend, we're going to go transfer portal. We'll do a big transfer portal edition because, as you all know, the transfer portal shut down on the final day of April. Therefore, everyone who is enrolled in the transfer portal, entered the transfer portal, they are there. However, we do have decisions to be made. We saw a big one today with Michigan State quarterback Peyton Thorne transferring to Auburn. Check out the video we posted on that. We also posted a video earlier today. Speaking of realignment, Notre Dame to the Big Ten. No, I'm not predicting that. I am proposing it. I am proposing it for sure, and have posted many videos talking about why Notre Dame belongs in the Big Ten in football. Yes, absolutely they do. And Felipe, thank you, saying the shows are awesome. Thank you for that. But Notre Dame to the Big Ten. So what we've done here in our series over the last few weeks is we have basically sized up all the various schools that are rumored to go to another conference. So think Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado to the Big 12. And we have looked at how those schools have fared in the last 20 plus seasons since the year 2000 against the Big 12 and how they would project forward in the Big 12. Done the same thing with Oregon and Washington in the Big 12, Oregon and Washington in the Big 10, because of course they've put their applications in. We've looked at Stanford and Cal versus the Big 10 and how that would project forward. We've looked eastward and checked out Florida State and Clemson. We're also going to look at Miami, and we have posted our Notre Dame video today against the Big 10. Do you believe Notre Dame has faced the Big 10 83 times since the year 2000? So a lot of data to go on with Notre Dame and the Big 10. Connor is asking, Mark, why did you not do Oregon State? Oregon State against who? We've got no rumors about Oregon State going anywhere except maybe merging with a Mountain West. You want me to do an Oregon State Mountain West video? I can do that. Sure. I have fun doing these videos. I love looking at those particular matchups. We could do that for sure. I also, now that spring practice is in the books, going to be releasing our power rankings. So our conference power rankings, we'll release those in the next few days, as well as program rankings for 2023. So the program rankings, I have basically had the program rankings done for about a month. I just need to review them and get them out there. And so we will have those. And you can rest assured that once we release the program rankings, that we'll give you about 3 days to take those in. And then we'll do a live stream and take your calls and questions and comments. And of course, your complaints about the program rankings for 2023. We're going to sit on those for about 4 to 6 weeks. And then here in about 4 to 6 weeks, we are going to deliver our all-time program rankings. Those will be a whole lot of fun. Tony and I get together on Sunday night. So on Sunday night is the Trojan Conquest live show over on the USC channel. So check that out at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific, that is. Trojan Conquest Live on the USC channel. Then Tony and I are going to jump on at the conclusion of the show to break down USC football in regards to academic standing, the football, the athletic history, where those particular components rank currently in the landscape of college football. And I have reeled in Tony to do the car wash this summer on all the various team channels. So that should be a good time. Again, as John is letting us know, Trojan Conquest Live, Sundays at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Again, I am intending on coming back sometime this weekend to break down the transfer portal in college football. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Please hit the like button. Remember that we've got an Aura sponsorship that if you sign up on Aura, please, aura.com/MarkRogers. And you sign up right there for your 14-day, 2-week free trial and give it a shot, give it a look, save your identity, save your finances. And we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, and we will see you soon.